Hey everybody, welcome back to Discover Springford. Today is a super exciting time for me as we sit down with the president of Springford Area Historical Society, William Brunner.
I'm Jeff Desiato, a local realtor, aspiring actor, and transplant to the Springford area. And I'm on a mission to find the best that Springford has to offer. I'll be interviewing local business owners, civil servants, and other prominent members of the community to find out what makes Springford a great place to live, work, eat, and explore. I invite you to join me on my journey as I discover Springford.
We have a lot of information on Spring City or Royersford. The only thing, if you're looking for a lot of information on Limerick, we have the book that Muriel Lichtenwalder did on Limerick, but they have their own historical society.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes in here looking for something specifically on Limerick, I have no problem referring them to Limerick Historical Society. The problem that we have is Oaks and Montclair are in the Springford School District, but they're a pretty good distance from Spring City or Royersford. And occasionally we'll get someone that'll come in and they'll want to know something about Montclair or they'll want to know something about Oaks. Now I have my postcard background. I have all my postcards on the computer and I can look up old postcards, but as far as the history, the canal comes through Montclair. So we have a lot of interest on there. But sometimes I'll have people come here looking for information on those two specific areas, and I'll do research for them, but I can't put my finger on something right away because they're in the school district, but they're not in our Springford area. Covers just outside Lakeview Park.
Yeah.
I wrote stories about Lakeview Park. It's mostly in Limerick. Fernwood Cemetery. You saw the sign out there when you come in. Fernwood Cemetery started back in 1890, I guess it was. There was 5 men from Royersford. Lewin, the man that built this house, was one of the 5. They bought the ground, the old Fernwood farm, and they made a cemetery out there. But the cemetery sits right outside the borough of Royersford. It's Limerick Township. Now, a few years ago, a developer came in and bought the cemetery. He didn't buy the cemetery because he wanted to have a cemetery.
Yeah.
He bought the ground because he wanted to build the hotel that's out there and the Outback Steakhouse. And that's why he bought it. And he built the buildings. They were developed. I go to the Outback.
Yeah.
And put up a line of trees to kind of hide the cemetery. The old chapel that used to sit there, tore that down. A lot of people were sorry to see it go, but they tore the chapel down. And then they took the Fernwood Cemetery sign, which sat up on big stone pillars, and they took it down. And one of our members, Dick Marshall, who lives over on Arch Street, same street that I live on, came driving by, and there was a bulldozer pushing this sign and rolling it up into a ball. And Dick got out and said, "What are you doing?" Oh, he says, "I'm a contractor. They hired me to take the sign down." Well, Dick says, "Well, can I have it?" And the guy said, "Well, if you can haul it, you can have it." So Dick got a friend of his that had a flatbed, and 3 men went over and they loaded this thing on the flatbed and they took it back to Dick's house. And he spent a couple of months flattening it because it was rolled up into a ball. And
Oh my gosh.
He flattened it, welded it, sanded it, worked on it. And when he got it all done, he said to me, "Bill," he says, "I don't really want it. Can we put it at the museum?" I said, "Bring it over." So they brought it over and they bought cast iron, they're cast iron. We bought big iron posts, cemented them into the ground. We put the sign up here. And then we had one year we had a intern, a fellow that came that worked here during the summer. And I had him sand it all off and painted it, and we painted it black, and then we got gold paint for the lettering, got it all fixed up. And we salvaged the sign from Fernwood. There are people still being buried there.
Wow.
4,000 people at Fernwood. But the sign is gone. And I have taken, over the past, I don't know, 7, 8 years, a lot of flack, because I have people that come in here. I had one lady who was a 5th grade school teacher from Phoenixville. I thought she was going to hit me. She was yelling, and the people out in the parking lot come running in and said, "You need to see the president. He'll tell you. He'll talk to you." They come running in and sent me out. Yeah. Sent me out into the lion's den. And I went out, and she had herself all worked up about, why don't you put that sign back where it belongs? And what are you doing with it? And I have people buried there. And I said, look, they had already rolled it in a ball. It was being scrapped out. I said, we saved it. Once we got it fixed up, we put it here. People can still see it. Now, I said, here's the problem. If the owner of that cemetery wants the sign back and he's going to put it back up, we'll give it to him.
Yeah.
I said, you as a person that has people buried there, if you want to start a crusade, if you want to get a group of people, and you want to work on him to do that, be my guest. I said, I was involved with saving the sign. I don't intend to go over there and knock on his door and do your business.
Yeah.
You want the sign back there, I'm telling you right now, we're going to give it to him. But you got to get that done. I'm not getting that done. But that's only one. I've had several people that have really been upset.
Wow.
That we have the sign.
Yeah, they don't know the story of how
they don't know how it got there. They don't know that it was most of the
trashed.
people.
Anyway,
Let me tell you something. Most of the people that are buried there, and I can say this for a fact, most of them were from Royersford.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the biggest cemetery.
Yeah.
There is none in. Well, I don't want to say that. As soon as I say that, there's a little.
Yeah.
Dismont Cemetery is in the borough. It's the big cemetery for Royersford.
Tell me a little bit about Lakeview Amusement Park, because I see a lot of the banners and stuff like that. Where was that located specifically?
Lakeview was right down here for Marshalls and Coles.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and back in 1900, Benjamin Kern came over and bought a piece of ground there in Limerick Township, which borders right on the borderline of Royersford Borough, and he started on his farm to mine ice. He cut ice off the lake, and he sold it in Royersford, had a horse and buggy, took ice around. Before people had refrigerators, they had ice boxes. And then in 1921, people started buying electric refrigerators. They became popular. His ice business
plummeted probably.
Couldn't sell ice when you got an electric refrigerator. And so he bought himself a little motorboat, gasoline-powered motorboat, and he rode around his lake. Now, the lake was a big lake. It's a little pond now, but it was a big lake, spring-fed lake. I think he said 6 acres or something. It's a 7-acre lake on the poster. Oh, wow. That may be exaggerated, but it was a big lake. Well, he was riding his boat around on the lake, and people came down Township Line Road. Now, this is 1921. Some of them were in cars. Some of them were still riding horses and buggies. But they come down in 1921, and they saw this motorboat riding around the lake. That's, motorboats in Royersford are rare.
Right.
And they pulled in and they watched, and he looked over, and there was about 14 cars parked out there in the field watching him with the boat. And he called them over and he said, "You want to go for a ride?" Yeah. So he started taking people for a ride around the lake. Crowds got bigger. Then he started charging them a nickel.
Yeah.
No more free rides.
That's right.
Then he went home and he told his wife, he said, he said, "I think we got something here. People are coming and paying me a nickel to ride on this boat." He says, "I think we can open up a park." And that was actually in the early 20s. Oh. That was the beginning of Lakeview Park. And he added some rides and a picnic grove and swimming in the lake. And it became a popular spot. And a lot of the companies and whatnot would have their family picnics and get-togethers over there. And then his son took it over for a short period of time. And then he sold it to Vitabli, the brothers. And they really built it into what most people that still remember Lakeview, they put in all the rides, and they brought the carousel in, and the roller coaster, and they made it into what we call a more modern day amusement park. It was never on the level of Willow Grove or Dorney Park, but it was an amusement park, and people here in Royersford went to the amusement park, and then it ended up going by the wayside.
Right.
It deteriorated, and I think in '91 they had the final auction of all the rides. They sold the carousel about 5 years earlier, but they just couldn't make a go of it. The insurance for the liability on the rides, that was sky high. The rides themselves, some of them cost $500,000 for a ride. It was just the cost, what was there, but the money, the income wasn't. So it closed up.
Yeah. And now it's been developed into the
shopping
center.
The only thing left of Lakeview Park now is a little pond out there with a few geese on it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a Lakeview Drive, and there's a couple names around town, but at this point, people don't know that there was an amusement park there.
Yeah.
You know, I have a problem with my age because we have young high school kids occasionally take a tour, and I'll start talking about Diamond Glass.
Yeah.
And they'll look at me like, Diamond Glass?
Yeah.
What's Diamond? Oh, well, that closed in the 80s. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That was before you were born.
Yeah. So you have to give them the whole history of that on top of it.
And basically 90% of what I talk about, if I'm talking to youngsters, it's before they were born.
Yeah.
And then the real challenge, which I'm not good at, is when they bring in the Cub Scout groups. And, now
7 and 8 year olds.
Do you know where the Schuylkill River is? Oh. So then that becomes a real problem. You know, the only thing you have to do is have a lot of patience and you know, walk around. And they'll ask questions, but it won't have anything to do with what I want to answer.
Do you find that when you talk to people that it rekindles something, maybe they didn't realize how interested they were in the local history, and then when you talk to them, you can kind of see the light bulb go on a little bit, and they start to be more inquisitive, and and that's how they kind of become members, or they start subscribing to newsletters and things like that.
Along that line, similar to what you're saying, my biggest amazement, it never ceases to amaze me, is that people will come. Last year, I had a nice lady came. She's in her, I'm guessing age, I just know people. She's in her 50s, and she lived over on Broad, probably still does. Lives on Broad Street in Spring City. And she'd come up, and she'd come in, it was about 2 o'clock, and she said, oh my gosh, this is really something. How long have you been here? Well, I said we moved in 2000. So we've been here for 17 years. Well, I've lived on Broad Street for 10 years, and I never knew you were here. And, you know, it's like people that travel between Spring City and Royersford travel the main streets.
Right.
We're on the main street. When we acquired this building, I told you, we were down at the train station. Mm-hmm. Lee Warner was told by the railroad that they were taking the lease. They weren't going to let him have the building anymore. Some story about the wires over. It was malarkey. It was malarkey. But they made us move out. Then we went down to the Spring City Hotel. We were there for like 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Then we hooked up with the Bard Community Center here in Royersford, where the library is, and we were given space there. We rented it for $1 a month, and we were there. And you had like 12 steps to get up just to the building, and then once you get in the building, there was 3 more steps to get up to the next level. So many steps, and so far away from Main Street that nobody knew we were back there.
Right.
And we wanted to have a presence. We wanted to be out on the main street of town. Now, of course, there's a problem because half your people are from Spring City and half from Royersford, and we're going to have to put it in one of the two towns.
Yeah.
And the other half is going to be upset. I mean, that's just the way it is. But this property right here, the lady that lived here, Thelma Greavy, this 5th generation Lewin family, so it stayed in the family for 5 generations. Bob Weichel, he was president. He was president for 12 years. I just passed his mark this year. Bob Weichel was a member of the Lewin family. Okay, so he was a Lewin. He knew Thelma and Thelma's daughter, who lived up in New England. Thelma told her daughter when she was on her deathbed, "Don't let them take my house and make it into a parking lot."
Yeah.
Well, right next door, the house that Bob Weichel lived in, that was a Lewin house, was tore down by the First Federal Bank to put in their parking lot. Kathy Calhoun's parking lot was an old Victorian house.
Yeah.
She told Bob Weichel, "Look, Mom doesn't want the house under any circumstances. She doesn't want this house turned into a parking lot. So my only resource is to sell it privately." She said, "Would your historical society like to buy Mom's house? I'll give it to you real cheap. I'll sell it to you for $175,000. Well, that's cheap, except we didn't have any money.
Yeah, right. We're a nonprofit.
We're a nonprofit. And so Bob Weichel put in a grant request to the Bard Foundation. Now, the Bard Foundation gives money to local nonprofits, and it was started by Robert and Agnes Bard. They had the Bard factory here, the business here in Royersford. They had no children. They started this fund, and it's a foundation, and they give away money to nonprofits in Royersford. That's been expanded to Springford now, but originally it was Royersford. Bob put in a grant request. I happened to be here the day that they called. The lady called on the phone. Usually, they send you a letter. You've been awarded a grant. But in this case, they had a proposal. They called us up and they said, "Look, we asked them for $150,000, figuring we could come up with the rest of the money." And they called us on the phone and they said, "Look, we can't give you $150. We can only give you $50,000 a year for 3 years." And 50 plus 50 plus 50, that's 150. Yeah, it sounds good. We'll take it. So they gave us $150,000. However, you noticed how the old barn over there is all fixed up, the gallery. Well,
Right.
the first thing that happened is when we came over here and looked at the property, we had 41 stoves that we had to put on display. We didn't want to hog up the house. We couldn't put them in the barn because it was a dirt floor. So we said, we ought to fix up the barn, make it into an expanded museum where we could store all of our stoves. To make the story a little longer, we ended up spending $100,000 fixing up the barn. So now you're looking at $275,000, and we got $150,000. We had a drive, a fun drive, and we had a big thermometer out here out front, and we went around to all the businesses and the people. We asked all of our members, we asked everybody we could for money. And the town, this is back in 2000, very generous. They came forth with $57,000. So you do the math, and now we're only financing like $70,000. So we had a mortgage. So we bought the property with the mortgage. We've been fixing it up, and we've got it in pretty good shape right now. And we paid the mortgage off 3 years ago. And a lot of the work that you didn't even go upstairs yet. All the rooms upstairs, the hallway, our new bathroom downstairs, a lot of the work has been done by Eagle Scout projects.
Oh, wow.
The Sacred Heart, right down the street, right down there, the Sacred Heart Boy Scout Troop 231. They have, on the average, if you took over the 17 years that we've been here, if you took an average, we've had at least 20 Eagle Scout projects that were done here on our property.
Wow.
So the Scout Troop and the people of they're a tight-knit community. When I go to the ceremony that they have, the name is...
Is it when they become Eagle
Yeah,
Scouts? Or,
the Eagle Scout thing. They always ask me to go and tell about the Scout Project. And the parents are so involved with the children, and they are so friendly, and Several of them, while their sons were doing projects, have come up to me and said, Mr. Brunner, if you need something, let us know. We'll come and help you. And on a couple of occasions, I've called them out on that favor. Mr. DePietropaula, who's a member, he said to me he's going to get involved when he retires. I keep telling these people I'm not going to live that long. But he now, I called him up. I said, we have a flag box out here that the scouts put in, and it has to be emptied a couple times a year. I never dreamed that we'd get that many flags. And I called him up and I said, remember you told me you'd help me on anything? He said, absolutely. I said, well, our flag box gets filled and I have a hard time getting somebody to come and empty it. I'll take care of that. He comes over, he empties it, he gets another key made, and now he takes care of it for me. But when I was Court of Honor, there you go. I remember this. When I was at the Boy Scout Court of Honor just this past year, and I get up and I said to the people there, and I didn't want to upset, and I said, look, I said, I want to tell you something. I said, I don't belong to an organized church. I said, I'm not a Catholic. I said, I don't talk religion, but I said, I want to tell you something. If I was going to join a church, I said, this is a church I would join. I said, your group here is just fantastic. I said, all the people that have offered to help, all the things that you've done for our organization, this is my church.
Right.
The historical, this is where I spend, when I retired, people say, well, what are you going to do with yourself? I said, I'm going to take photographs. I'm going to run my garden railway. I'm going to go over to the museum. I had no problem retiring. Work was just in my way. But, I have since, I retired 2 years ago. I dismantled the garden railway. Now it's my wife's flower garden. And I still I love to take photographs. But the thing of it was that the Scout organization has done a lot for the Historical Society. We just need to get people. People come, like the lady from Broad Street, and she says, I didn't know you were here. And we have a lot of people that'll come and I'll say, were you ever here before? No. Where do you live? That's the second question. Where do you live? Royersford or Spring City. Well, how long have you been there? Oh, I've been there for 20 years. I can't imagine that people don't know we're here. There were 4 glass companies, 2 in Royersford and 2 in Spring City. In this cabinet, I actually have posters or letterheads of each one of the companies. The biggest company and the one that some people will remember would be Diamond Glass. Diamond Glass was here from the 1890s up until when they closed, which I think was in the late 80s or 1980s or one of the bottles over here tells you the last bottle. But let me look, see if I can. Last bottle, August, you can see it. Was it 1990?
1990, August 24th.
Okay,
yeah.
that'll do. That'll work.
That's amazing.
It was there for 100 years, so a lot of people heard of Diamond Glass. If you have a glass bottle that has a diamond on the bottom, 9 times out of 10, that was made right here in Royersford at Diamond Glass. That cabinet over there that you're looking at is all whiskey, alcohol, rum, whatever, no, not rum, but whiskey, gin, alcoholic beverages. Every one of those bottles was made at Diamond Glass. Wow. And so one day I was here at the museum and a guy drove up and he said, I got some Diamond Glass bottles. Would you like them? I said, oh, sure. And he had boxes full of them. And I said, what are they, all whiskey bottles? He says, yeah. He said, they're all different. And they're all made at the Diamond. And I said, well, how did you get them? He said, well, I drank them. I said, well, you did a lot of drinking. But we had them packed away for years, and I thought they were so colorful. I kind of liked the art.
Oh, yeah.
So
a lot of big names, too.
Yeah, I don't drink alcoholic beverages, but I can appreciate the artwork on the bottle.
For sure. They don't make logos like this anymore, that's for sure. Let's get all the close-ups here. Yeah.
Now, Diamond Glass made medicine bottles. They made some bottles, Avon bottles. They made, they made more than just whiskey bottles, but their products were commercial. And this cabinet here, very interesting. The items in this cabinet are called whimsies. And whimsies are the glass workers that worked in the factories were skilled glass workers. A lot of them here in Royersford came from Belgium. They come over from Europe and they worked here in the glass factories, and they were highly talented. And when they got here to the United States, they were making medicine bottles all day. It was kind of boring. But at the end of the shift, after their 12 hours of working, they were allowed to take the molten glass that was left and make little things for themselves. So the flowers, for example, they were made at Diamond by the workers, and they would give them to their wife or their girlfriend or their mother or anybody. And the canes, they made glass canes. A chain, that was made at the Diamond.
Oh, wow.
The glass bottles up top, the green ones, they were made at the Bennett Glass Works. An interesting little bottle there, the green and the cobalt blue are darning bottles, and they were made by Nehemiah Amster. And the darning bottle, we have people come in today, they don't even know what a darning bottle is, but Grandma would stretch a sock over the bottle and sew up the hole that was in the toe of the sock.
Okay.
And so Nehemiah Amster, he had his own mold, and he would, at the end of the shift, whatever color they were running, if they're running green or blue or amber or clear, he might have enough glass in there that he could make 10 or 12 bottles. And he would make those bottles, he took them home, his wife filled them with candy, she put a cork in the top, and she put a little red label sticker on it, and then she put a bow on it, and he took it around and he sold it to the stores. And if you were going around the store in 1910, you could buy that for a dime.
Wow.
Those bottles today, when you see them, they sell anywhere between $100 and $200. There's one on eBay right now. I looked at it this morning. I'll buy it now for $175. I think that's a little high, but they are valuable. And I always liked, I don't do it anymore, but I used to like to go around the yard sales in Royersford and Spring City and see one there for a quarter.
Oh, yeah. People don't know what they have in their garage or in their attic, right?
Well, I'm very sure that someone would put one out and not know that they have a collectible.
Yeah.
But those things are all called whimsies. Now, the Spring City Glass Works, Ltd., was down on South Main, and they made fancy bottles, a little bit more fancy. The Bennett Glass Works, which was over in Spring City, they made plate glass. They were the only glass manufacturer in the two towns that made plate glass. And of course, they went out of business early on. It became Ithaca Glass, and they just brought it in box loads on a box car and cut it up and sold it. But Ithaca Glass was gone by 1930. And same way with the Newborn Glass. Newborn Glass was right above the station on the railroad tracks on the right-hand side. We have a place there. Well, I think it was a Bleach Works, Crazley, and now I think I forget the name of the place, but they launder radioactive uniforms from up at the nuclear plant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they have a place there that does that, and that sits right on the foundation of what was Newborn Glass Company. And Newborn Glass Company, we have some of their bottles. They made ink bottles, and they for Carter ink, and they made sauce bottles. They made a number of different bottles. Those bottles are they made battery oil bottles, Edison bottles. They made bottles, and their bottles have a keystone on the bottom with the letter N, and they're rare. You just don't find a keystone Newborn bottle very often. I think there's one up there I found on eBay that was a like a sauce bottle, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
Do you spend a lot of time kind of scouring the internet for things like that, just to see if you can get lucky? Or?
I get up every morning before I get dressed, and I turn on my computer and I see what is happening in Spring City and Royersford. I've been on the computer since 1998, and I've been monitoring eBay. They send me an email if something is listed. It's either Spring City or Royersford.
Oh, wow.
And then I have a large file collection by year of every item that is listed and what it is posted for and what it sells for. This morning I lifted a 1939 Royersford football program. I didn't bid on it. We have them here. We don't have that one. But I copied the image and typed it all and put it in a file. So I've been doing that for 15 years.
Wow.
The ones that hurt are the ones that you bid on
and you don't get.
They're the ones that hurt. I mean, and there's been a few items. I mean, there was a diamond glass catalog. We don't have any. And it was from 1917 and had pictures of all the bottles that they made. It's, oh my God, we got to have that. And I figured, well, the Historical Society, they're not going to want to spend a lot of money. But I bid that up to $150 and I didn't get it.
Wow.
And so, and then there was a bottle that I was buying for myself from a store in Spring City, a blob top bottle. And I bid that up to 110 and I didn't get it. So there's stuff that goes high,
I guess the hope is that whoever won that bid will eventually, donate it or something. It'll come back your way at different means or something. You never know.
We get to the case back here. There's an Amster darning bottle that was made of diamond glass by Nehemiah Amster. There's one on eBay right now for $175.
Wow.
And they go anywhere between $100 and $200. I mean, it's a collectible, but that's another story. We have a Facebook page. I put stuff on Facebook every day. We have a following on Facebook. Doesn't necessarily, I mean, some of those people do come over and visit, but most of the people that are on Facebook and look at what I put on, they enjoy what I put on, and that's like...
That's enough for them.
It's like...
Have you gotten a lot of people who have since moved out of the area that follow along with the Facebook page? I would imagine that would be kind of a way that they can stay connected a little bit.
We have people that follow it, and some in Florida, and different people have moved, and yes, we do have people, and I recognize their names. Now some of the classmates, the girls get married, they get different last names, but some of them I recognize. We do have a large group of people, and when I put stuff on that's older, I mean, if I put something on from Allen's Candy Store, oh my God, or Lakeview Park, diamond glass, anything that's reasonable. But if I put stuff on that I like to talk about, I mean, I like to talk about everything. But when I get into the old Yost grist mill, well, it burned down in 1884. It's not there anymore. And it's long before they're born. And these things, to me, it's all important. It's all part of the history. But if you do history that people are a part of, everybody remembers Allen's. I remember Allen's well. Went there. And if you lived in Spring City, I guarantee you, if you were there during the time that Allen's was there, you come across the river to go to Allen's, okay? And that's just the way it was. Now, over here, this big cabinet, I want to talk about that.
Sure.
And it's Spring City High School, 1935. That cabinet was built by the class, made by the class of 1935 in their shop, and they donated that to the school, trophy cabinet. Now, the school was built in 1928, so it was only 7 years after the school opened. And the school was a red brick building, looks like a castle. There's actually a picture of it in there. I don't know if you probably could open that door to get the glare from the thing, but this cabinet was on the verge of being pushed into the hole when they dozed the building. In 1982, they took the high school building and they demolished it, and they caved it in and pushed all the brick and everything into the basement of the building, and this cabinet was sitting right on the edge, ready to be pushed over.
Wow.
And Lawrence Shaner happened to be there. He was the local town historian. He was one of the founding board members of the Historical Society, and he was all over town, and he was over there when they were demolishing the building, taking pictures. And when they put this there on the edge with the bulldozer ready to push it into the hole, he said, wait. And he said, can I have it? And they laughed. They said, sure, you can have it.
Wow.
And they put it on the back of a pickup truck and took it to his home on Pikeland Avenue. And his daughter, who lived with him on Pikeland Avenue, she saw it and she said, Dad, what are we going to do with that? Oh, he said, it'll look great right in the middle of the living room. She said, I don't think so. And so they put it in the basement, and they put it up on blocks, and they stored stuff in it. And it was in the basement for 40 years. And just recently, last year, Dawn moved to Telhai. And she's still on the board. She's still active. She's an honorary board member, a very dedicated member. And she called me up on the phone. She said, Bill, I have a cabinet. Dad salvaged it from when they demolished the school. She says, and now I'm moving. I got to get rid of it. She says, I just don't know what to do with it. Do you think you'd want it at the museum? I said, my God, yeah, it will serve two purposes. It'll be a centerpiece for me to talk about, and it'll be some place to put school items.
Yeah,
I said,
that's great.
Yeah, we wanted it. So the only thing we had to do is we had to have lights put in it, and we had to, the shelves were glass, and they got broke over the years.
Yeah, sure.
And so we went the inexpensive way, and we put plywood shelves in and covered them with felt. But it's fine.
Yeah.
This is our school section, and I think I told you before it was Springford, it was Spring City, Royersford. Mm-hmm. So what you're going to look at in the cabinet is you're going to look at a bunch of stuff, and the blue and white, that's Spring City, and the orange and black, that's not Halloween, that's Royersford. Those were the school colors, and the rivalry was tremendous. The footballs in here are Thanksgiving footballs. It's hard for me to think, sad for me to think that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, kids will come in to the museum. I won't be here, but they'll come in and they'll say, what's a Thanksgiving football? What is that?
Yeah.
And then you'll have to explain to them that at one time we played football on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
And I got these footballs. They were donated by Gene Hannabury. And I had one there, Spring City 41, Royersford nothing. And oh boy.
Yeah.
I'm from Spring City. I live in Spring City.
Yeah.
So I was all excited. And I went to put that ball in the cabinet. And two of the members came over and said, when you got one where Royersford won, then you can put them in the cabinet. Well, Royersford won that one there by a big score.
51-7. It
Yeah,
looks like.
51-7. So when I put the Royersford 51-7, then I could put the Spring City. I was able to put them both in.
Yeah, so that rivalry, even though we're
Yeah.
all combined, it still stands a little bit, I'm sure.
A lot of the things that we have, well, all of the things that we have in the cabinets were donated by former class members that came in here and wanted us to have them. Same way with the yearbooks. We pride ourselves in having all the yearbooks. I think we're only missing one now. And we buy one every year we order them, and we have all the newer yearbooks. And when somebody wants to look at a class yearbook, it's much easier to come to the museum, sit down in a chair, and look at the yearbook than what it is, to go over to the school. Because you
Right.
go through a little bit of a procedure. The door is locked, you go in, you got to make an appointment. It's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
But they were very generous with us, and they donated some of the later yearbooks, and the older yearbooks. I don't want to make it sound bad, but the books from the 40s, a lot of those people have passed on, and the families don't want the yearbooks, and so we most of those yearbooks, 40s and 50s, we got maybe 2 or 3. We keep an extra one up on the 3rd floor. We've only had 2 that have been taken out of here in the 17 years that we've been here. But we try to keep an eye on stuff that doesn't walk out.
Yeah.
But we're proud of.
know off the top of your head the one that you're still missing? Maybe somebody watching this would be able to provide it to you guys. Do you know what year it was?
Well, it's either 2001 or 2002. I'd have to go over there.
Okay.
Yeah, but those are the two. Those two walked out together.
Someone didn't want to pay for it with their graduating class.
No, here's the thing.
You know who you are.
We have a split museum. We have the gallery. We're in here now.
Yeah.
We have the house. What happens? A lot of times we've got one host.
Yeah.
And someone will come and they'll want to look at both buildings, and then you have to come with them. You don't want to seem like you're leaning over their neck.
Right.
And there are times when somebody will sit there for an hour
Yeah.
and look through books. And if you think that they're trustworthy, you might say, well, when you're done, come over to the house. 99% of the time that'll work. Once in 17 years, we had somebody come in. They liked those books so much that they walked out with them. If they'd have taken ones from the 40s or the 50s, we could have run upstairs and replaced it.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen much.
Yeah.
Usually when we have a book over in our library over there, it's just that somebody took it out and then they put it
somewhere else.
And we don't have a librarian.
Yeah.
You know, you go to Chester County to the Historical Society, you get a book, you don't put the book away, they put it away.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It goes back where it belongs.
Yeah.
But in our library, people go in, they'll take a book, and then they sit there and they forget where they got it.
Right.
They don't want to leave it on the table, so they stick it in somewhere. And then I have a little bit of a time, trying to find it.
Right.
Another display, which is sitting here, is a display from Pennhurst. Now, Pennhurst was built and opened in 1904 to 1908. It opened in 1908. Pennhurst opened. It was called the Home for the Feeble-Minded and the Epileptic, and it was there was an act of the legislature in 1903 that actually brought this to come about. It sits basically in East Vincent Township. It's right outside the borough of Spring City, but our historical society is Spring City area, Springford area, which would be Spring City, Royersford, the surrounding areas. And it actually had an address of Spring City, PA. I live on Arch Street, and I'm a half a block out of the borough, but my address is Spring City. And over the years, the people that were there were referred to clients, inmates, residents, retarded. There were so many different words that were used. I don't think the word retarded is used anymore, but I saw a big headline in a 1965 paper where they're having a home week for the retarded. I said to my wife, who worked there for 18 years, I said, when did they stop using that word? She says, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
So, but the bottom line is that the institution is closed now, but while it was there, it housed a total of like 3,000 people. It was as big as Spring City was. Wow. But it was up on, they call it Crab Hill, it was up on a hill, it was isolated, and a lot of people didn't even know that it was there. I moved to Spring City in 1958, and I didn't even know that Pennhurst existed, and I went to a Halloween parade down on Main Street, and I saw this funny looking band. I shouldn't say funny, that's not nice, but they had clothing that didn't fit, and they were playing music that wasn't quite to the level. And I said, what band is that? They said, that's the Pennhurst band. I said,
wow.
Pennhurst what? They said, Pennhurst Spring City. And they had a band, and they marched in the parade, and they were active. And then when I joined the Explorer Scouts, and when I was in high school, our post went up on a visit, and we visited the Boy Scout group up at Pennhurst. That was my first introduction to going to Pennhurst. Pennhurst in the 50s was totally self-sufficient. They had their own dairy farms, pig farms. They had all the clients, the people that lived there. They had workers, and they worked for a boss, and they worked the farms, and they had a shop where they made wickerware. That's just a small part of what they had. It was a town unto itself, their own movie theater, their own hospital. I mean, it was an independent, functioning town.
So Pennhurst itself was like its own, for lack of it was its own city or its own town of itself, independent of Spring City, even though it was located there.
It was a state-run hospital, and there was a lot of concern. Some of the care of these patients was not what you would desire it to be, and there was a lawsuit that was brought about, and there was a lot of publicity on television, and eventually it closed. What I will say to you, there are many different points of view on Pennhurst, and I was given the opportunity by Arcadia about doing one of the Arcadia books. I said, no, it needs somebody far more involved and knowledgeable than me. And Greg Pierman did such a book last year, a great publication. I could have not done it because I had certain views. For example, my wife worked on a ward with about 45, she called them boys. These were men, but a lot of them had the mental age of a boy. Yeah. And she worked on a ward with 45 or so men, and there was her and one or two other aides. Usually one would be on break or whatnot, but they were on a locked ward taking care of these children, as she called them. And what used to get me was that many of them came from homes where you might have several family members and one person that was affected that needed special care, but it was too much for the family to cope with, so they placed them in Pennhurst, where you put 45 of them in a room with a couple people to take care of them, and then you say, well, the results weren't always desirable. And then you have phases. I mean, it was there for a long time. They had the phase where they had them drugged, then they had the phase, they swung the pendulum the other way. Well, we don't want to give them any drugs. Now you see that they're a little bit hyper. I mean, it's just crazy how they just kept changing the thing. Now they have the asylum. It's a Halloween attraction.
Yeah, very popular. I was in New Jersey and I saw a billboard for Pennhurst Asylum, which I thought was crazy because it's over an hour away.
And we get high school kids come here to the museum. I'm so happy they come to visit us. And what do they want to know? They want to know about the ghosts of Pennhurst. And I said, look, we got books about Pennhurst. We got all kind of information. I can sit here for an hour and talk to you about Pennhurst. I said, but there's no ghosts at Pennhurst. I'm sorry, there aren't any ghosts up there. You want to,
I spoke to Bill Hoffman at the Spring City Hotel about the same thing. He said he would tell people about the hotel, the history of the hotel, and all they ever wanted to know was, did you see any ghosts?
Is there ghosts?
Yeah.
Well, look, let's be honest. I mean, Greg Pierman did a great. Anybody who wants to read about Pennhurst, you want to get a hold of his book. Yeah. But if you want to know about ghosts, then you got to go to some fiction writer. Yeah. And the thing of it is, if I were going to do a book, I think I would do a book on the ghosts at Pennhurst because it would sell.
It would sell a lot. Yeah,
it would sell more. It would. But it's a story. It's part of our history. Yeah. And there are some parts of our history that people want to forget. I don't think we want to forget it. And I don't think we want to paint a cloud of doom that it was all bad. It wasn't. My wife worked there for 18 years. She cared about her patients. She never struck any of them. She had her glasses busted twice. I mean, she was bit a couple times. Wow. There were dedicated people that worked there. And it's just not fair to the people that worked there that cared about those kids to put them in all with a group. Because, it's just...
Yeah, the bad apples spoil it for everybody else.
And that's really the way it is. But it's part of history now. And so that's where it's at. But, the subjects... The recent subjects are ones that
people feel more of a connection to because they can remember, or at least they remember their parents, or if there's at least a genealogical connection there. I found that even with this producing this show is that I've had some people reach out and say like, I grew up in Spring City, or I grew up in Royersford, and I live in Massachusetts now, or I live in Arizona, and somebody from their family who's still local shared it with them. And they're like, oh, this is so cool because I feel like it's still a connection. I would imagine that would be a great, an untapped, a way that we could find, obviously, hopefully, by doing this episode that people will be like, oh wow, the Springford Area Historical Society.
It only takes a couple of, what I say, good people that are dedicated. I want to tell you a little bit, just a short story about Joe Forrest. I was telling you about Joe before, these pictures up on the wall. About 14 years ago, Joe wandered in here, sat down, looked at stuff in the library, and then a couple of weeks later he was back, and then pretty soon he started becoming regular, and then he joined, he became a member, and our membership is $15. I mean, you get newsletters, you get the use of the, now it's free, our museum is free. You can come over here, it's free. You want to give a donation, we'll accept it, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Our membership for one person for a year is $15. Unlimited use of the library. You know, we send 4 newsletters out a year. We have 4 public programs a year. The public programs are free, but you get to hear about them through the newsletter. Joe come over, started hanging around, he became a member. Joe was very interested in family history and doing ancestry research, and he did genealogies, and he started, and I said, Joe, would you like to host? He was over here every day that we were open, and he might as well be a host.
Right.
So he became a host. He not only came in on the days that he hosted, he came in on all the other days that were open. He was here when we were open Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, he was here. And at first he started doing some of the, like the Gruber family, do a history on the Gruber, the Lewin family, the people that built this house. He did one on Rogers family. He did one on the important people that had historical significance to the towns. But then he expanded out. And Mr. DePietro-Paula, his son, did a Boy Scout project. Mm-hmm. And Joe says, we don't have enough Italian families up there. Well, we got the DePietro-Paulas, and we have the Di Giuseppes, and we have about 4 of them now. Joe was that kind of guy. And when people came in here, and he talked to them, and they wanted help with their family tree, and he would sit down and he would show them all the things that we have. We have the funeral directories. He went around to all the cemeteries within about a 10-mile radius, photographed all the tombstones.
Oh, my word.
They're on our computer, and when you type them in, you put last name, comma, first name, the computer puts them in alphabetical order. So he goes out and does 4,000 stones at Fernwood, and suddenly we have the names on our computer. And later on, we had a couple Boy Scouts that followed up the project, and they did a map and they did a book, and we have books on Fernwood and Zion. But Joe was just, he lived this, and as time went on, he took it upon himself to do all of these books. And I told Bob Hollenbach we had to increase our budget for the office to buy more notebooks and to buy more paper. And he was cranking out these books left and right. And when he died last year, his wife, Peggy, she came over here with boxes of stuff that he hadn't finished because he had so many books and right now we have them upstairs. We have shelves in the archives room. We have a lot of his stuff that's up there, needs to be sorted through. Some of it is incomplete, some of it's near complete, but it could be put in albums with the family name on, and it could be completed at a later date.
Right.
But right now, we don't have somebody that's in charge of family history.
Yeah.
And I mean, so you have to rely on the books. Some of these books are on the computer. Ancestry.com has the little icon, and he put the information on. Some of them, the research that was done to put these books together is on the computer. So if you do a search, you can find that information. But Joe was one of these people that walked on, and in a few short years was a board member. He became assistant vice president. He was an officer. He took charge. He was doing the scheduling for people when people didn't come in. He was here anyway, but he did the scheduling. And it got to a point. I told you it got to a point, and I wasn't jealous. I was happy that Joe was here.
Yeah.
It got to a point where people would come in, and I'm sitting back and I'm waiting for them to ask to talk to the president or talk to somebody that knows something, and I have people come in and they'd say, "Where's Joe?" And well, he's over here, and they wanted to talk to Joe, and say, "Wow, they're coming to see Joe," and I wish that he would have still been with us.
Yeah.
I wish that they were still coming to see Joe, but he was like one of those rare gems that walks in, and the funny part about it, I live in Spring City, but I'm in East Vincent.
Yeah.
East Vincent, where I live, I'm a half a block out of the borough. I'm not Spring. I went to high school. I was in Spring City. I'm out of the borough. My kids went to O&J.
Oh, okay.
I'm out of the borough. I'm a Springford fan. I graduated from Springford, but I'm out of the borough. Joe lived over here in Trapp. He's out of the borough. He didn't join Trapp. He joined us. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But the two of us, I was sitting here one day and I said, "You know, Joe," I said, "I'm president and you're assistant treasurer." I said, "We're not allowed by the bylaws, we're not allowed to hold office because we're not in the borough of Spring City."
Wow.
He said, "Well, what do we do?" I said, we have a very congenial board, and our treasurer's not in the borough, and there's a couple other people that aren't in the borough. I said, I think about half of them don't live in Spring City or Royersford. I said, what we're going to do is we're going to change the bylaws. So we brought up a motion and we changed the bylaws that you don't have to live in Spring City or Royersford.
We're going to have to pause our conversation right there and invite you to come back next week for the exciting conclusion of Discover Springford's first season. It's hard to believe that we have 22 episodes in our first season, and it's exciting to think about what we have in store for the future. If you'd like to know more about Discover Springford, I encourage you to check out discoverspringford.com, and if you would like, you could support the show by sharing this video with your friends and family.